Have you ever had something taken from you so boldly that it made your blood boil? Imagine working your whole life for a piece of land only to wake up one day and see 35 houses built on it without your permission. That's exactly what happened to me. And before I tell you how I got my revenge, I want you to pause and think. What would you do if an HOA stole your land? Let me know in the comments, because I bet you'll have a lot to say after this story. I never thought I'd find myself in a fight with the very people who called themselves neighbors. For years, my land sat peacefully by the lake. Thick woods, open fields, and a small dam I had built myself to control the water flow from the hills. It was my family's land, paid for in blood, sweat, and generations of hard work. But when a new HOA moved into the area, everything changed. They didn't buy my land, they didn't even ask. They simply acted like it was theirs. One day I drove past what used to be my open meadow and I froze. There, standing in neat little rows, were houses. Not one, not two. 35 brand new homes built right on my property, and not a single permission slip, payment, or contract had ever crossed my hands. They had stolen it, plain and simple. At first I thought there had been some mistake. Surely no one could just build an entire neighborhood without the owner noticing. But when I went to confront the HOA president, a smug woman named Linda, she smiled as if I were a fool. She waved her manicured hand and said, "This land is now part of the HOA development plan. It's better for the community this way. You should be proud your property is being used to house families." I stood there in shock. My land wasn't theirs to take. I told her as much, but she laughed in my face, telling me to either accept it or take it up with the courts. She knew full well that dragging a legal battle against an HOA with millions in their pocket could take years, maybe decades. In the meantime, they would live happily on land that belonged to me. For weeks, I wrestled with my options. Lawyers told me it would cost more money than I could afford. The sheriff's department shrugged, saying it was a civil matter. I watched every day as moving trucks pulled in, families settled down, and the HOA strutted around like they owned the place. They even had the audacity to send me letters demanding I pay HOA fees for my remaining property. Imagine that. The thieves wanted me to pay them for stealing from me. My anger boiled into something darker. They thought they were untouchable, that they could rob me in broad daylight and get away with it. But they had forgotten one very important detail: the dam. My dam. That little dam wasn't just for show. It controlled the water runoff from the hills, and without it, the entire meadow, and now the shiny new HOA homes, would flood within hours of a heavy rain. It was the reason no one had ever tried to build there before. The land wasn't safe unless you respected the dam, maintained it, and understood the flow of water. I had built it with my own 2 hands, stone by stone, reinforcing it every year to protect the property, and now it was my ace card. I didn't make the decision lightly, but one evening, as I stood overlooking the rows of houses on my land, listening to Linda barking orders at new homeowners, I realized I couldn't let them get away with it. They had taken what was mine. It was time to take it back. The night was quiet when I walked out to the dam. The stars hung low over the water, and the moon lit my path like a spotlight. With every step, my heartbeat echoed louder in my ears. I reached the gate of the dam and stood still for a long while, remembering my father teaching me how to control the water, warning me about the power it held. Then, slowly, I turned the wheel. At first, it was just a trickle, water slipping past the barrier, whispering into the dark. But as I opened it wider, the trickle turned into a roar. The lake surged forward, rushing through the valley, unstoppable. Within minutes, the flow carved its way across the meadow, straight toward the cluster of stolen homes. Lights flicked on one by one as confused homeowners stepped out onto their porches. Shouts rang out. Panic spread. I stood on the hill and watched it unfold. My land was reclaiming itself. By morning, the neighborhood was a disaster zone. Streets were rivers, lawns were swamps, and basements filled with muddy water. Families scrambled to salvage what they could, dragging soaked furniture into the streets. Linda stormed up to me, her perfect hair ruined, screaming threats about lawsuits and damages. I said nothing. I simply held out the deed to the land, proof that it had never been theirs to build on. "You wanted my land," I told her coldly. "Now you can live with it." She stared at me, speechless for once in her life, dripping wet and covered in mud. Days later, the HOA board collapsed under the pressure of lawsuits from angry homeowners. The development project was abandoned, and the land returned to me, battered but free. The dam still stood, stronger than ever. And me? I finally had peace, knowing that sometimes nature itself delivers the justice no court ever will.